My praise, my all, shall be for Christ alone. His robes for mine, what cause have I for dread? God's daunting law, Christ mastered in my stead. Faultless I stand with righteous works not mine, saved by my Lord's vicarious death and life. I cling to Christ and marvel at the cost. Jesus forsaken, God's estranged from God. Bought by such love, my life is not my own. My praise, my all, shall be for Christ alone. His robes for mine, God's justice is appeased. Jesus is crushed, and thus the Father's pleased. Christ drank God's wrath on sin that pride is done. Sin's wages paid, propitiation won. I cling to Christ and marvel at the cause. Jesus forsaken, God estranged from God. Bought by such love, my life is not my own. My praise, my all, shall be for Christ alone. And on that last, his robes for mine, such anguish none can tell. Christ God's beloved, condemned as though his foe. He as though I accursed and left alone. I as though he embraced and welcomed home. I cling to Christ and marvel at the cost. For just forsaken, God estranged from God. Bought by such love, my life is not my own. My praise, my all, shall be for Christ alone. Just that last line and a half. Bought by such love. My life is not my own. My praise, my all, shall be for Christ alone. Boy, that's a good thing to live by, folks. Pastor.
Well, good evening. Good to see each of you. Just kind of a report of what she and Sharon did over the past week, and there are some photos she has that she's going to share. And after Flo has come and shared about her trip, the Landises, Landi, what's the plural of a Landis? When you've got more than one Landis, is it a Landi? Atlantises. Okay. Grammar was never my strong point. All right, so the Landises are going to be singing a special for us, and the reason I asked Carrie to remain behind is I thought about 2 minutes' notice was good for the Landises, and so they're working out what they're going to sing, and so Flo, if you'd like to come at this time and share just a report on the week and anything you wanted to say, and the photos should be ready to go on the slides, and then after you have shared a report. The Landises will be sharing a testimony in song. So I'm going to sit down.
Good evening. Everybody hear me well? Okay. I don't get to public speak too often, and I rarely, if ever, get to use a mic, so it's kind of new for me. When the hurricane came through, I can't really speak for Sharon, but my initial thought pretty quickly was, I have to do something. So I said to Dave Saturday morning, of course this had all kind of unfolded Thursday into Friday, I said, what would you think if I said I want to go to North Carolina? And he said, if you feel you're being called to go, you need to go. He said, but I want you to find a buddy. So I said, okay. So I had asked a couple people, and then I was here Sunday night at church, and I just happened to look up and see Sharon, and I was like, I'm going to ask Sharon. And she agreed to go with me. So that was how we set about going. But if you're familiar with, I'm sure most everyone here has heard of Billy Graham and Franklin Graham and Samaritan's Purse. I had been involved with Operation Christmas Child in another church. So I was familiar with the organization and knew that it was what I felt a good organization to work through. There's many other organizations. I'm not saying by any means if you decide to do some kind of a mission work that it should be through Samaritan's Purse, but it was my choice because I knew that they were a great organization. So to give you an idea, Boone is the international headquarters for Samaritan's Purse, and that was actually where I intended to go, but they didn't have any openings. So they did have openings in Asheville, and that is where we ultimately ended up being housed. And when we volunteered, we did not know that we would not be staying in a local church initially. So we took our air mattresses and our cots and all of our bedding and all of the things. And it turned out when we arrived, they said, oh no, you're being lodged right here at the Cove at the training center. So we were actually in more or less a hotel room the whole week instead of being in a local church and having to use trailer showers and all the things. So they said, don't get used to this when you do your next appointment, because everyone there did tell us, we'll do another one. And honestly, I think they're probably right. When we arrived Monday evening at dinner, they did give us some statistics. There had been, at that point, at only the Asheville site, as of Monday evening, they had received 1,079 work orders just for the Asheville location alone. Of those 1,079, they had completed 328. They had had 5,000 volunteers come through already that had worked 51,000 hours. In the time that we were there, our team, when you're assigned, you go in, they orient you the first day. They make you watch a video, sign the waivers of, what to do. And they tell you, you're not going to be given any job to do that you're not comfortable with. So if you're asked to do something and you can't do it, they'll find you a job that you can do. So that was very reassuring for us when we went out Monday morning, and they said, okay, well, we're going to break you up into teams. Everybody go to your team. So we went out front, we found the truck. If you look online and see the Samaritan's Purse box truck, there literally are box trucks like that full of supplies. You walk out, you find your truck, you find your team, you meet your team leader, and they tell you what their work orders are for the day. And then they break you up into a group and say, okay, this is where we're going to send you. So Sharon and I were going to a home where we thought we'd probably be doing just debris cleanup. That was our first 2 days. We were at one home. And it was an elderly gentleman. He lived alone. His name was Walton Mitchell Bedingfield, and he went by Mitchell and said they named a mountain after him. He was very grateful. He was saved. He actually has written a book that is online about his journey to Christ and his life, which was interesting to see. I found it on Amazon, and I'm going to read the description of his book to you here before we go tonight, just because it seems so right. So some of these pictures, if I can get this clicker to work, that was the field in front of his house right there. If I had to guess, I would say Mitchell had about 3 to 4 acres. He was right up against the Swannanoa River, so the river was behind his home. Along the left side of his property, he had a line of trees. And to the left of that line of trees, there were houses, and they were all modular and mobile homes. And all of those houses were swept off of their foundations and were caught by the trees. So everything that was in those houses ended up on Mr. Mitchell's property. And when we got there, we were trying to clear all of that out for him. So that one struck me. That's a child's car there upside down, although there were plenty of cars everywhere that weren't children's. That's Mr. Mitchell walking away from the base of his house there. He's actually walking back towards the river in that photo with his cane. That picture there is, that one's a tough one for me. That was our third day there. After we finished at Mr. Mitchell's house, we were assigned a house in the mountains. And that was 2 lots over from the house that we were at. That what you're looking at there is an actual mudslide. And there had been 2 homes on that site. The lower house actually ended up in a house across the road, which I do have a picture of. And there was a dump truck and excavator coming, clearing that house out. The upper house was a mobile home, and it ended up further down the hill. And unfortunately, the people that were in that home did die in the slide. The people in the house lower down, the husband somehow managed to get on top of the couch and rode down the mudslide on the top of the couch. And after about 3 hours, he was able to free his wife, and she's still in hospital with injuries. So that was hard. The house next door to the mudslide looks beautiful, doesn't it? It's 1 year old. It's condemned because it was knocked off its foundation by the mudslide. So it will have to be demolished and torn down. That was across the road. That's from the right side. There is a house beneath all that rubble in there, and a car too. There was also a car inside the house. There's another angle of that. This is the backyard of the home that we were actually in. They surmise what saved this woman's home, it was actually her grandparents' home, they built it, is this retaining wall along the back. We got there the second day that our team was working on that site, so they already had most of this area clear, but it was full of mud. And they believe the retaining wall kind of slowed the flow of the mud, so the mud flowed into the back of the house, but it didn't destroy the house. They were able to save the house. So that third day that we were there, we spent most of our day shoveling mud. That's another view of the retaining wall. Some of it had broken up, but it was there. And there's that house across the street again that they were taking out. And if you look in really close, just to the left of that excavator or whatever that piece of heavy equipment is, you can see a tire. That's because there's a car in there. There's an SUV in there. That was something I actually stopped along the road to take a picture of that one. There were so many things I didn't take pictures of that are much worse than what you're seeing. It was very overwhelming. I wanted to tell you all, if you prayed for us, thank you. We needed it. There were several times through the week where I definitely felt like I needed your prayers, and I was very thankful for that. This was the last house that we were at, the last day. All of the sites that we visited were in Swannanoa, so the river was very close. That last house that we were at, when we got there, they were clearing a path to get to the house because you couldn't even get to it. They were clearing debris to try and get into the house to be able to work on it. So you're seeing a lot of debris piles there that we had started. There's the actual house in the background. It's brick, so they are trying to salvage that one. And the homeowners did say that the water went all the way up to the ceiling in this house. It was probably a middle-aged lady and her son. He said he woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning. The water was up to his chest. They tried to gather some personal belongings, and within minutes, they had to get out of the house. So they got out of the house, and their neighbor across the street was also outside the house in the water, and they swam to higher ground, which was behind them, and just happened to be a Dunkin' Donuts. So they swam over to Dunkin'. Dave says America runs on Dunkin', by the way. This was in their garage. This was after being there for 7 hours. This young man was a collector of sports memorabilia and had a massive collection of baseball cards and basketball cards. He was looking for a Michael Jordan rookie card that was somewhere in the house during the time of the flood that no one ever saw. This is inside. There was still water laying on the floor. All the stuff that was in the house had mold growing on it. There's the ceiling fan up above. It's got mold on it. So they were in the process of removing all of the drywall out of that house when we finished up our day there. I chose not to be inside the house for this particular one due to the large amount of mold, as I do have some mold allergies. Samaritan's Purse is great at providing the gear you need. They had the respirators and the N95 masks and Tyvek suits, but I chose to work outside. There was plenty of debris all through the yard. Sharon and I both stayed outside on that particular work site. That was the kitchen after they got the appliances out and where they started tearing some of the drywall out. If you look real close, that red baseball cap in the center, some of you might know, that is Tug McGraw. I just happened to walk by and saw that card, so I snapped a picture of it because I knew the name. And it was pretty wet, or I maybe would have picked it up and tried to save it for the homeowner. But this is just more of the cards. He had a massive stack of comic books there. They were saturated, completely ruined. There was a trampoline in the yard that was very buried. We didn't even get to that. And I kept seeing something white behind it that I thought maybe was the bottom of a hot tub. Finally, I investigated a little further because nobody had really been in that far. It was a porta potty sideways. That's the front of the house there. There's a blue tarp you can see off to the left where we were putting things that the homeowner was trying to salvage. Here, the lady with the red pants on is actually the homeowner. One thing that I thought was great that they did with all of the homeowners, at the end of work on the first day, each homeowner was presented with a Bible that was left in the truck all day for every member of the team to sign and write a personal message in. So we all did that, and they explained the Bible to them. It was a red letter Bible. It had an index, a concordance. They explained how you could look up a topic. They explained that the 50 most asked questions of Billy Graham were in the back of the Bible with his answers based on scripture to back it up. So, and they specifically told each homeowner, we don't want you to take this Bible as a keepsake. Do not keep it in the box. We don't want you to put it on a shelf. We want you to use this and study from it. This homeowner, her name, I can't pronounce it, was T-H-A-N-H. If anybody knows anything about that. She said she also goes by Tanya. But that is her, the white mask that you see hanging off of someone's hair. That woman was working with us all day. I didn't find out until the end of the day that she is from Singapore. She actually came to North Carolina just to help because she had been at one of Billy Graham's crusades in Japan and was saved. And she's been following Samaritan's Purse ever since. So that was the person that we met that we think was the farthest away from where they came from. That was Mr. Mitchell's house. He had water in his house, he said, up to almost the bottom of his windows. And you can see how high it was off the ground. And there's actually a lot of sand and dirt that had washed in that's covering some of the courses of his concrete block at the bottom. So until the excavator came the second day and dug that out, I actually took that prior to them digging it out. He actually had a lot more block exposed. So the water went up really high in his house. And he was there. That's his lot. You can see that line of trees I talked about. You know, Google Maps is great, but it doesn't show you right now. So you can see all those houses to the right. All of those houses were washed off their foundations into his trees. And that's what you're looking at there was his lot beforehand. In the back, you can see an S there. That is marking the river. That's where the river's at, right there. On the opposite side of the road leading into his house was a mountain that pretty much went like this. So it just funneled all of that water right there to him and to that area. that was where the last house we were was, and it's actually showing you that the house is out in the middle of the road. But if you move just south of that, you can see there's a house with a green roof and there's trees all around it. That was the house that we were actually working at. And off to the left, you can kind of see part of the word where it says Dunkin' Donuts there. If you look real close at that picture, I actually found that in Mr. Mitchell's yard. That is a blow-up life vest. And I just thought that that was very ironic to find a life vest in the yard after a flood. So I snapped a quick picture of that. Our pictures were not so much of the people, because Samaritan's Purse did ask us to be very respectful of the people that we were seeing. They strongly encouraged us to talk to anybody that wanted to talk, whether it be the homeowner. They said they need to tell their story because it helps to unburden them. And if they tell it to 20 people, it's better yet. If someone was to stop us, a neighbor, we were also supposed to speak to them. We got close to several of the members on our team, and I found that our team members, we were relying on one another, telling our stories or telling what we'd seen or what we had heard, because everybody got different pieces of information from people. And after dinner each night, we actually had a share time where they would share how did you see God working today? And somebody did share about the lady from Singapore at our last meal there. That's one of the houses that got smashed. There's some more. These are all in Mr. Mitchell's. He had a garden. I thought it was interesting that that was the only post in his garden that was still standing, because it looks like a cross to me. So I took a picture of that. This is inside Mr. Mitchell's house. After he had gone through his belongings and we went through what we could try and salvage, he had 2 bedrooms left of things that he was trying to keep. Everything else had to be thrown away. As far as the homeowners themselves went, if it was personal, we were to ask if it was okay to discard it, even if it was ruined. This is where we were cleaning up. So Sharon and I spent a lot of time the second day scrubbing the mud off of these floors to get them what they call contractor ready, so that someone can come in and repair what he has left. We did help pull off the drywall. We pulled out the insulation, and then once you get the insulation off, there's a base plate there, and that was covered in mud, and you had to scrape the mud off of there too. So there was a lot of work involved. There were a lot of people on site helping out with all of that. So at one point, when we were there Monday, we happened to have a group of what they call day volunteers, because you could be overnight or you could be day, students that came down from a college in New York, and they were just, everybody was young and just full of boundless energy. So I'd get halfway across the yard with something that looked heavy, and one of them would walk up to me and say, "Let me take that for you." And they would take it the rest of the way to the pile. And then I'd turn around and go back for something else. And then somebody would meet me halfway and say, "Let me take that for you," and take it to the pile. So that was really helpful too. I thought I'd share with you too that, we found when we got there, everybody said, "Well, what are you going to do when you get there?" Well, I don't know. I'm going to do whatever they need me to do, wherever the Lord leads us. I can tell you if it's something that you're considering, they have a need for leaders, team leaders. They do ask their team leaders to come down and work for 2 weeks at a time. They have chaplains on site every morning. The chaplains would divide up, and they made a concerted effort to have a chaplain sitting at every table as we were eating our breakfast and talking to us. They would come out to our teams with us and pray with us and over us before we would leave to go out and work. And then while the teams were out working, the chaplains would be going and visiting and discussing, with other families and providing support. And they would travel in teams. And then in the evening, they'd come back in and, everybody would share and ask how your day went and what did you do today? What did you see? So it was very much, we were leaning on one another for support. Because we were at the Cove, and the Cove was actually affected itself, there were areas that we were not allowed to go to. They were taking care of down trees. They had water on site that they needed to reroute. They weren't using Asheville's water system because it wasn't up and running, so they were on their well water. the people working there were affected. Their own homes were destroyed. Billy Graham's oldest daughter, Gigi, was on site because her home was partially destroyed. So she came to the dining room with us every night. She was like the celebrity. People were walking around going, I talked to Gigi. And I'm going, who's Gigi? You know, and we found out really quickly. And we were blessed with Jonathan Lutz. Billy Graham's grandson actually came one morning and he did our morning devotional, which they tried to keep to about 5 minutes. And within that 5 minutes, he had me crying, just like that. Like he was a tremendous speaker. I'd love to see him again. But they had needs for everything. They needed people to work in the call center. They needed people to work in the kitchen. They asked for volunteers to help clean up afterwards. They asked for volunteers with parking. And even when we went out, you know, there were a lot of elderly people there. Would you believe the average age for a Samaritan's Purse volunteer is 68 years old? So, yes, there were young people there. There was quite a bit of college-age people and, you know, people our age there. But the majority of the folks were older. And the majority of them were there alone. They were traveling alone. And they said, once you do one of these deployments, you kind of get hooked and you'll go back. And a lot of them do go back. And their chaplains were working Sunday to Sunday there. But, you know, I would say overall, it was a really great experience. I've never done a missions trip like that before. I did one when I was a very early teenager that I barely remember because that was 35 years ago. I would definitely do it again. And I would say if it's something that you're thinking about, I would really encourage you. You know, if you're feeling led to do it, don't question what it is that you're going to do, because there is something for everyone to do. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you can listen, if you can pray, if you can uplift somebody else, you can be used. You know, we saw the Lord moving this week, and it was quite a blessing. There was just such an overwhelming feeling. I asked Sharon what she thought her standout moment was, and she told me. And I said, honestly, I think if I had to pick one thing, it would just be the unity of spirit and the overall atmosphere where we were. God is on the move, and everywhere we went, everyone was so thankful, whether we were helping them or not. I had a man stop me. He was in his front yard yesterday as I happened to walk by, because we were the sea of orange. They give you your orange shirt to wear. So everyone knows who you are when you're out and about. And he just stopped me to say thank you, to thank us for being there. And his home wasn't even destroyed. He just wanted to thank us and make sure we knew how much we were appreciated. And that was the overwhelming response we got everywhere we went. Everyone there was so thankful. There was a man on Mr. Mitchell's property that was living in a tent with his dog. He was in one of the mobile homes that washed away, and he said when the water came up, it came up so fast, and he had 3 dogs, and he could only hold on to one. And but he said, you know, a Black Hawk had come in, dropped him a tent, warm clothes, blankets, a generator. He said he had everything he needed. That he found a bike in some of the debris and was riding a bike to and from town. So he was also saved. So that was a blessing. But Mr. Mitchell did tell us that unfortunately one of his neighbors did wash away, and he did see that. And so he had said to us that he had not cried yet when we presented his Bible to him. So please lift him up in prayer. He is definitely a hopeful man, but the only time I saw him smile while we were there was I had found a box of pictures that nobody else had seen yet or gone through, and I started pulling them out. And I called him over, and I said, Mr. Mitchell, I said, I'm sorry, but so many of these are completely soaked, and I can't get them apart. But then I got to a section where all the new pictures were sticking together. Polaroids and anything printed on newer paper was stuck together, and I couldn't do anything to save them. But all of his old pictures, black and white photos, were just curled. They weren't sticking together, and they weren't wet anymore. And I started pulling them out, And I'm like, what do you, and he's like, oh, well, this is my mom and my dad and my brother and I, and we're at Newport News Beach here. And you looked at the bottom and it said like 1957 or something. He started telling me, he smiled then when I was showing him the old pictures. And I told him, I said, I'm so sorry about the other ones. And he said, you know, God is teaching me that it's okay to leave some things go, you know, and that was just interesting to hear his viewpoint. But I looked up his book, and I don't know if it struck Sharon the same way, but his book was called The Progress of One Pilgrim, and there's an overview on the back of it that he wrote. It said, this is the story of my life's journey. Life is sometimes funny, sometimes sad, it's sometimes tragic, and sometimes heroic. Perhaps you will see reflections of yourself in my pilgrimage and gain a renewed appreciation for your own walk through life. Our common bond of humanity lets us know we are not alone. I share my story with the hope that each one who reads it will be encouraged. I hope you will gain greater fulfillment in your life. I view life as full of surprises, full of the unexpected, and as an unfolding mystery awaiting discovery. When life is viewed this way, each day is exciting and is worth living. And I just thought that was the perfect end to our week, really. Did anybody have any questions I could answer for you? I've rambled on for a while here. No? All right, thank you.
I know they appreciated your prayers very much, and it's something to bear in mind is you see one series of pictures like that, and you kind of think, okay, that was a bad flood, but then you need to remember that that has been replicated, you know, thousands of times. So that was kind of a snapshot of a couple of homes, but that same damage and worse damage was you know, happening thousands of times over, and so the devastation. And I think Dave felt the same way being down there. Like, you take a picture of it and you try and capture the moment, and it's just incredible. And so what they saw was, you know, really moving. So pray for them, pray for others who are still helping down there, and those who are living in that. You know, it's going to be such a long time before they get back to anything like normal. And the people affected by it are never going to be the same. I mean, it's just not something they get over and move on from. So continue to pray. And, you know, I'm grateful that they were willing and able to go down and do what they did. So it's been good to have the Landises with us today, and we enjoyed catching up this afternoon. And so if you want to come at this time and share the song that the Lord has given you.
My wife just pulled this song out. We haven't sung this song in a while, but I was just looking at the words of this, and when we sing the second verse, think how this second verse really relates to what the Lord does for us and what we have in Him. And I'm very, very thankful for the people that volunteered, and I thank you so much for your participation in going down there. There's a lot of work that has to be done, and all that is only about an hour and a half north of where my wife and I live, and living there for over 45 years, we've never seen anything like that in the years because we're so tucked in away from the main part of the ocean. But and we had quite a bit of damage in our area with just unbelievable trees down, power lines everywhere. But as that hurricane went further north, it really dispersed its water, and its damage was shown. So they definitely need our prayers for sure. I've learned to know a name I highly treasure. Oh, how it thrills my spirit through and through. Oh, precious name, beyond degree or measure, My heart is stirred whene'er I think of you. My heart is thrilled whene'er I think of Jesus, that blessed name which sets the captive free. The only name through which I find salvation. No name on earth has meant so much to me. That name brings sorrow to a soul in sorrow. It makes life's shadows and its clouds depart.
Bring strength in weakness for today, tomorrow. That name brings healing to an aching heart.
That name still lives and will live on forever, while kings and kingdoms will forgotten be. Through mist or rain, 'twill be beclouded never. That name shall shine and shine eternally. My heart is thrilled whene'er I think of Jesus, that blessed name which sets the captive free. The only name through which I find salvation. No name on earth has meant so much to me. No name on earth has meant so much to me.
That is the only real comfort in life is knowing Jesus. And the Lord may use a great many things and many people, but there comes a time when there's a hurt so deep or a need so great that only the Lord can meet it. And the efforts we make to help one another, we are so limited in our efforts, but the Lord is able to use us and empower us and help us. Recently we were in Isaiah 40, and it described towards the end of the chapter there, he says, even the strength of the young men will fail. You know, those ones we sometimes look at and they just seem to just go and go and go, and they've got boundless strength, but, you know, the only one who is without limit is Jesus. And it's a wonderful message and song, and so I appreciate that. I appreciate the report that's been shared, and we give thanks to the Lord for what he's continuing to do, even in the midst of tragedy. Well, if you can turn in your Bibles to Genesis 27, I just want to give a few final thoughts that we didn't get to this morning in Genesis 27. And really the theme was to do right. And as I was looking through this and thinking about the application for us, I was reminded of Bob Jones Sr. He was an evangelist, and he started Bob Jones University. The Lord used him in a mighty way. And he had just had a way with words, and many of his sayings were posted on the walls around Bob Jones University at different times, from what I'm told. And my pastor went there, and he would read them all the time. And so when he came over to England, he would very often share those little sayings, and so a lot of them are kind of in my mind. I never met him. He passed away before I was ever able to meet him. I did meet Bob Jones Jr. and Bob Jones III. I didn't meet Bob Jones IV, but he's around somewhere. But I met a couple of them. But Bob Jones Jr., Sr., he said, it's never right to do wrong to get a chance to do right. And I think that's something of what was going on here with Rebekah and Jacob. Maybe she thought, well, God has promised that Jacob is going to be the one through whom the promise would come. He was the younger one that God promised would be served by the elder. And so maybe she thought, Jacob Isaac is going to go wrong. He's going to bless the wrong son. He's out of God's will. I need to step in. I need to do something to put things right. And so maybe her motives were good. But what she did in trying to make it happen was wrong. And we need to remember that we need to do right. It's never right to do wrong. It's get a chance to do right. I mentioned this morning the Garlocks who would take that phrase and write a hymn from it, and they kind of added into it, do right till the stars fall. And so I want us to think about that. Just as we kind of, draw to a close what we began to look at this morning, in Genesis 27, it opens up with describing Isaac's intention to give the blessing to Esau. Rebekah hears about what's going to happen, and she intervenes, and a plan was formulated by which the birthright would be essentially stolen in the same way that Jacob had traded the birthright from Esau when Esau previously was hungry, thought he was going to die, and so he sells his birthright. Here, now Jacob is going to steal the blessing. And a plan was formulated. We noted that Rebekah, Isaac, Jacob, Esau, they were all in really a mess, spiritually speaking. They were all, equally guilty. And so they planned this deception. And when we get to verse 6, we see the deception, or let's go down to verse 18. We're going to see the performance. They planned the lie, and now we're going to see the performance of it. And in verse 18, while Esau is out trying to shoot the animal and then cook it and bring it back to his father, Rebekah has kind of taken a shortcut, cooked the food, and given it to Jacob to take to his father. And in verse 18, he came unto his father, and he said, My father. And he said, Here am I, who art thou, my son? And Jacob said unto his father, I am Esau, thy firstborn. The amount of lies and just bold-faced lies and deception, it wasn't even like it was exaggeration or, some, type of lie that some people might overlook and say, well, he exaggerated, or, it was a lie of omission. This was an outright lie. And worse still, in some instances, he brings God into it. And we'll see that as we go down. But he says, he came unto his father, he said, My father, and he said, Here am I, who art thou, my son? And Jacob said unto his father, I am Esau, thy firstborn. I have done according as thou badest me. Arise, I pray thee, sit and eat of my venison, that thy soul may bless me. And Isaac said unto his son, How is it that thou hast found it so quickly, my son? And he said, Because the Lord thy God brought it to me. And this may be one of the worst elements within this, that, here he is, he's performing this terrible lie, deceiving his own father, and then he kind of brings God into it. He says, oh, God help me to capture this and kill it and to cook it. And God had nothing to do with this. Isaac said unto Jacob, Come near, I pray thee, that I may fill thee, my son, whether thou be my very son Esau or not. And Jacob went near unto Isaac his father, and he felt him and said, The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he discerned him not, because his hands were hairy as his brother Esau's hands. And remember, Jacob, under his mother's instruction, had taken the skin of a goat and put it on him, so that he would feel hairy like his brother. And he said, Art thou my very son Esau? And he said, I am. He said, Bring it near to me. I will eat of my son's venison, that my soul may bless thee. And he brought it near to him, and he did eat, and he brought him wine, and he drank. And his father Isaac said unto him, Come now, near now, and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his raiment, and blessed him, and said, See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. Rebekah had given him the clothing of his brother, so he would smell like his brother, feel like his brother. The only thing he couldn't do was sound like his brother. But there was enough deception left here that Isaac believed. And so Isaac
pronounces a blessing upon him. He says, therefore, God, give thee of the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve thee and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be every one that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee. And so now the blessing has been stolen. And I understand there's a cultural thing going on here. It's kind of different to us. This whole, is it just words that the Father is speaking? Is there some power in it? Is there a prayer? And I think there's a lot going on here that's unfamiliar to us. But within these words that he speaks, there are echoes of the blessing pronounced upon Abraham. That through Abraham, all the nations of the world will be blessed, and whoever blesses Abraham's descendants will be blessed, and whoever curses Abraham's descendants would be cursed. And these things have been promised to Abraham and then to Isaac, and it would have been promised to Jacob through God's way, but here Rebekah and Jacob kind of schemed to make things happen in their own strength. Well, then it came to pass, as soon as Isaac had made an end of blessing Jacob, and Jacob was yet scarce gone from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting. He also had made savory meat. He brought it unto his father and said unto his father, let my father arise and eat of his son's venison, that thy soul may bless me. And Isaac his father said unto him, who art thou? And he said, I am thy son, thy firstborn Esau. And Isaac trembled very exceedingly. This word for tremble here means he was just shaken. Maybe it was shaken out of fear because he realized that he'd been deceived. Maybe sorrow because he kind of realized that his son couldn't have gone through this without help. Probably there was a great deal of anger here. And he says, where is he that has taken venison and brought it me? And I've eaten of all before him, and before thou camest, and have blessed him. Yea, and he shall be blessed. He says, I can't undo what's been done. When Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with a great and exceeding bitter cry. And he said unto his father, bless me, even me also, O my father. And he says, thy brother came with subtlety. Remember, Jacob's name is linked with that word for being subtle, for being a deceiver. And he says, he's taken away thy blessing. Is not he rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright. Well, he didn't. You sold it. You felt like you were so hungry you were going to die, and you sold it. He shouldn't have bought it. He cheaply paid for it, but you shouldn't have sold it. He says, behold, now he's taken away my blessing. And he said, hast thou not reserved a blessing for me? And his father pronounces a blessing upon him. He gives him a blessing, but within it there is a note of bitterness. In verse 39, Isaac his father answered and said unto him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above. He says, by thy sword shalt thou live. It shall come to pass, and as thou shalt serve thy brother, it shall come to pass when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. Do you think that sowed some seeds of bitterness, if it weren't already in his heart? And it says, Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand, then I will slay my brother Jacob. He knew the only way he could get the blessing back was to slay the one who held it, and then it would pass to him kind of as an inheritance. Well, these words of Esau, her eldest son, were told to Rebekah, and she sent and called Jacob, her younger son. Again, there's a note here of just kind of the drama and division in the house. At the very first, when Isaac calls for Esau and he says, get me venison, feed me, and then I'm going to give you the blessing. And then somebody overhears it and gossips back to Rebekah and says, hey, Rebekah, this is what Esau and Isaac are planning. And so Rebekah then schemes with Jacob, and Jacob and Rebekah do what they do. And then Esau, whether he's mumbling or doing whatever he does, he says he's going to kill his brother, and the gossip gets back to Rebekah, and the division in this household was tragic. It says, now therefore, my son, Rebekah, speaking to Jacob, says, obey my voice, arise, flee thou to Laban, my brother, to Haran, and tarry with him a few days until thy brother's fury turn away. A few days would turn into a few weeks, a few months, a few years. And by all accounts, Jacob would never see Rebekah again. He would one day return. He would make peace with Esau. But things were set in motion here that just bring so much sadness. And in verse 46, Rebekah says to Isaac, I'm weary of my life because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob take a wife of the daughters of Heth, such as these, which are of the daughters of the land, what good shall my life do to me? And Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said unto him, Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. And the story kind of moves on. But the performance here, this was something that was connived and planned and then carried out. And the end result of all of it was nothing but pain. Nothing good came of this. Now the Lord would take it and redeem the situation. The Lord would eventually use it and turn it around. But the pain that came from this was truly tragic, was truly sad. And one point that I think we need to come back to time and again is this: we need to do right. No matter how hard it is, we need to do the right thing. And here, if one of them at any point had stopped and said, you know what, there needs to be some honesty here, there needs to be some integrity. Somebody need to have stopped and said, you know what, this isn't what our father Abraham spoke of. This isn't the way that he lived. And yes, he made mistakes, but something here had gone drastically wrong. So 3 final things briefly, I think, for us to think about. The sinners were many. You know, very often you look at a Bible story and you can say, okay, here's the innocent party that was wronged. But here it just seems like the whole scenario was just full of people who were focusing on the wrong things. The sinners were many. The sins were many. Nobody seemed to stop and pray. Lies were covered by more lies. Isaac seemed to lack any kind of spiritual leadership. Jacob was faithless. He didn't believe that God would accomplish his will in his way, in his time. There was no patience. They were all rushing ahead. The sorrows were many. And I'm not going to go through those anymore because we've kind of seen them throughout today. But I want you to see that the solution is simple. And we can so easily take it for granted. You know, so many who serve with Samaritan Purse went down there because they have been helped by the gospel of Jesus Christ. And in turn, they want to help others because of Jesus. And the Landises sang this evening of Jesus. When I was in Morocco several years ago, you know, I'd always heard this, but seeing it just struck me that we were meeting in an apartment, and Christianity isn't strictly outlawed, but it is oppressed. And you can lose your job for being a Christian. Your families can ostracize you. There are consequences to being a Christian. And to be in that apartment with 20 or 30 believers, and when they sang the name Jesus, it cost them something. It really meant something in a way I think we sometimes take for granted. Jacob and Isaac and Esau and Rebekah, and they had some revelation, but nothing like we do. And they stumbled and struggled, but they serve as an example for us. The simple solution I mentioned this morning, Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 7. And if it's not underlined in your Bible, I'd encourage you to underline it. If you haven't memorized it, I'd encourage you to memorize it. And if you've underlined it and you've memorized it, but you're not doing it, well then do it. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not unto thine own understanding. Well, I don't understand. What difference is it going to make to obey God rather than doing my own thing? You don't have to understand it. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not unto thine own understanding. Why should I wait? Why should I be patient? You know, I need to do this now, and it's a good thing. Why not just get it done? Well, if God's telling you to wait, then wait. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not unto thine own understanding. Well, you know, my motives are good, even if the way I'm doing it is wrong. My motives are good. Well, trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. Simple faith will prevent sin. Simply believing would have made all the difference in the world If Jacob had said, you know what, I'm going to trust the Lord and let him do his thing in his way, in his time, this chapter would have never been here. If Rebekah had said, you know what, I think Isaac's out of line here, but I'm going to trust in the Lord. Let God do what God has promised in his way, in his time. If Isaac would have stopped and prayed and said, something doesn't seem right, something doesn't sound right, but instead of praying or asking for help or calling somebody in, he relied upon his touch and his smell and trying to figure things out on his own. If he had just trusted in the Lord with all his heart, maybe this could have all been avoided. So we just need to determine, by the grace of God, to trust, to lean on the Lord, to not trust ourselves, to not be wise in our own eyes, but to fear the Lord, depart from evil. Simple faith is going to fix so much. Again, do right till the stars fall. Determined to do right. Determined that you're not going to do wrong to get a chance to do right. And it's simple. But isn't it sometimes the simple things that trip us up? When we complicate things unnecessarily, we find ourselves in trouble. Keep it simple. Just trust the Lord. Lean on him, and if it doesn't make sense, trust in him. Don't rush ahead. Don't lag behind. Just walk with him. Follow him. Obey him. And sometimes we can kind of wrestle with the Lord and resist the Lord, but just trust him. Follow him. I've driven down them many times. I didn't realize that, truck drivers anyway, they refer to them as cattle chutes. When you're driving down through, Carrie looked at me terrified. It was funny this week, I was preaching and down in Kentucky, and she was watching at home on the live stream, and I started to tell a story, and I wasn't sure if I should or not. And ordinarily, I can look over, and she's kind of like, and it kind of lets me know, okay, don't tell this story. But she wasn't there, so I told it. But I just said cattle chutes, and she looked at me like, what on earth? Where are you going with this? But those, going down the highway, you get those concrete blocks up either side, and it kind of narrows everything down. And I've always noticed kind of pieces of, looks like black marks, rubber and everything up and down the sides of them. And I thought, how does that happen? As I was thinking that, a truck ahead of me just went up against it, and there was metal flying, and there was, just rubber being just ripped all the way down those things. And, I don't like those because it gets narrow. But what it does in many ways, it protects me from what's the other side of it. But it also makes it really clear which way I should go. And in my mind, I can resent those cattle chutes because, they're restricting me, but they're also making sure I go the right way. And I think with the Lord, sometimes it can be the same thing. We kind of resent being closed in. We resent not being able to go and do our own thing, but it protects us from what's on the other side. And it makes clear the way that we're meant to go. And so in your life, whatever you're going through now, whatever you may go through in the future, when the road gets a little bit narrow, don't resent it. Thank the Lord for it. Let that be your guide. Let God be your guide, showing you the way to go. Simply trust. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. The solution is simple. The application may be difficult. But let's determine to trust the Lord, follow his way, and do right till the stars fall, even if we're all alone in doing it. I'm going to close with a word of prayer, and then Brother Dan, if you can just lead us in a verse just to close out this evening, but let's pray. Father, I thank you for the day. I thank you for your goodness, and Lord, I just ask now that you would be with us as we go from here. And the situation with Jacob and Isaac and Rebekah and Esau is a sad one, but Lord, we have the advantage of the full revelation of your word. We have the advantage of knowing Jesus in a way that They really never could. They had sufficient, they had enough to know right. Lord, may we take what we have, the blessings that we enjoy, and determine that we're not going to try and do things our way, but we're going to trust in you and follow the path that you've laid out for us. This we ask in Jesus' holy name. Amen. Brother Dan, if you can lead us in a final hymn, just a verse or two of something, and then if you would close us in a word of prayer. And maybe if we can have Brother Landis close us in a word of prayer tonight, Dan, if you can ask him to do that.
Heavenly Father God, we thank you so much for the opportunity that we have to come and, Lord, to be encouraged from your word. We're so thankful for all that you have done for us. And, Lord, we just ask you tonight as we go our separate ways, we pray, Father God, that you will take the things that we've been able to hear today. May we be able to apply them to our hearts, our lives. Lord, help us to be always truthful. And, Lord, to be able to show